Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. If you've been learning English for months or even years and you still don't feel like you're improving, don't get discouraged. It's not because you're not smart or because English isn't for you. It's probably because the approach you're using isn't working.
Yeah, a lot of people spend hours studying but feel stuck. What if I told you there's a way to learn English faster and smarter, and it's based on science? Sounds like a game changer, right?
Absolutely. And the best part? These methods aren't complicated or boring. They'll actually make your English learning journey easier and more effective.
So, in today's episode, we'll break down 4 science-backed strategies to help you learn English faster and more naturally.
And trust us, by the end of this episode, you'll know exactly how to apply these methods to your own routine and finally see progress.
And today's video is very informative. So we have made you a summary of this video, so go to our website and check it out. You will find more tips for learning English. Ready to take your English to the next level? Let's dive right in.
All right, before we start, why so many common methods fail? I mean, you might be spending hours studying English but not seeing results. Why is that?
That's a great question. Think about this. How many times have you reread grammar notes or memorized vocabulary lists, hoping they'll stick? Or maybe you've underlined phrases in books, thinking that'll help.
Yeah, those are super common habits. But the truth is, they don't actually help you remember or use English in real life. They just give you the feeling that you're learning. It's what researchers call the illusion of learning.
For example, have you ever reviewed a word list over and over, only to forget the words as soon as you try to use them in a conversation? That's frustrating, right?
Totally. And it's not your fault. It's the method. These techniques don't force your brain to really engage with the language. But don't worry, we're about to show you much better ways to learn.
Okay, let's move on to our first science-backed method, retrieval practice. Trust me, this one's a game changer. Most people don't realize that the way you practice makes a huge difference in how much you actually remember.
Right. So, what is retrieval practice? Basically, instead of just reviewing your English material passively, like rereading notes or rewatching videos, you actively test yourself on what you've learned. This simple change makes a massive impact.
Yeah, it's all about making your brain work a little harder. For example, if you're studying vocabulary, don't just look at a word and its meaning over and over. Cover the meanings and try to recall them without looking.
And here's another example. After you finish watching a short English video or reading a paragraph, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what was that about? Then try to summarize it out loud or even write it down. You don't have to be perfect. The effort is what counts.
I love that example. And here's why it works. When you try to retrieve information, it strengthens your memory. Even if you can't remember everything, the process of trying helps your brain store the information better for next time.
That's such an important point. A lot of people think, oh, I forgot, so I failed. But actually, that's part of the process. Even if you struggle to remember something, your brain is still building those connections. It's like exercising a muscle. It gets stronger each time.
And don't worry, you don't need fancy tools for this. You can use simple techniques like flashcards. Write the word in English on one side and its meaning or translation on the other. Quiz yourself regularly. Apps like Anki or Quizlet are great for this too.
Oh, and here's a quick tip. Try to mix retrieval into your daily routine. Like, if you've learned 5 new phrases today, review them before bed. Then, test yourself again tomorrow without looking at your notes. Just doing this a few minutes a day makes a huge difference.
So, don't just read and reread. Actively challenge your brain to recall what you've learned. It's a little harder at first, but it's one of the fastest ways to improve your memory and your English skills.
Now, let's talk about another powerful method, spaced practice. This one's simple, but it's backed by a lot of research. A lot of learners try to cram everything into one in a very short time. You know, like sitting down for hours, hoping to learn as much as possible in one go.
Yeah, we've all done that, right? But the problem with cramming is that it doesn't help you retain information long term. It's kind of like trying to fill a cup with water that has a hole in it. It leaks out faster than you can pour it in.
So, what's the solution? It's spaced practice. Instead of cramming, you space out your learning over time. This allows your brain to absorb the information more effectively and helps it stick.
Right, so how do we apply this in real life? For example, if you're learning new vocabulary, don't try to study a whole list of 20 words in one sitting. Instead, study for about 10 minutes today, and then review the words again tomorrow.
And here's the key part. Don't just review it once. Come back and review it again after a few days. This spaced repetition helps you retain the words much better than cramming everything into one big session.
Another example. Practice speaking English for 15 minutes, 3 times a week, rather than one long hour-long session. It might seem like you're not doing as much, but this short, consistent practice works wonders for building fluency.
Absolutely. And when you space your learning, it gives your brain time to rest and process the new information. This breaks the material down into smaller, more manageable chunks that are easier to remember.
For example, if you're preparing for a trip and want to remember some travel phrases, don't just study them all in one sitting. Review them today, then again next week, and even a month later. That way, when you're actually traveling, those phrases will come to you naturally.
That's such a great example. It's like creating a memory bank in your mind, and every time you review, you're making a stronger connection to that information. Plus, by spacing out your practice, it feels less overwhelming.
Well, you don't have to feel guilty for not studying for hours at a time. The key is consistency, not the length of your study sessions. And trust me, your brain will thank you for it.
Let's move on to another method that's incredibly effective: interleaving. This one is a bit different from the other two we've talked about. What does it mean?
Well, instead of focusing on just one type of English activity at a time, interleaving means switching between different types of activities throughout your study session.
It might sound confusing at first, but the idea is simple. Rather than sticking to one thing, like only listening practice for an entire session, mix it up.
For example, you might start by listening to a podcast in English, then write a short summary about what you've heard. After that, try a speaking exercise based on the same topic.
The reason this works so well is that it helps your brain make connections between different skills. So instead of just focusing on one area, you're practicing how to use English in a variety of ways, making the learning process much more flexible.
It's like trying to build a house. If you only work on one part, like just laying the foundation, you won't end up with a complete house. You need to work on the walls, the roof, and the doors at the same time, even if it feels harder at first.
That's a great analogy. For English learners, you could alternate between grammar exercises and vocabulary practice. Or you could mix up reading comprehension with speaking practice.
Exactly. It might feel more difficult at the beginning because you're not focusing on just one thing. But that's actually a good thing. Mixing different topics together makes it harder in the short term, but it forces your brain to adapt and learn more flexibly.
And when you practice switching between skills like this, you're actually training your brain to use English in a more real-world, dynamic way. In real conversations, you won't just be focusing on grammar or vocabulary, you'll be juggling many things at once.
So, even though it might feel a little tough, this method really helps you in the long run.
And the beauty of interleaving is that it makes your learning more enjoyable too, 'cause you keep things fresh and interesting.
Yes, it might be challenging at first, but trust us, it's worth it. You'll see how much more flexible and natural your English skills become over time.
Now, our last method, called elaborative interrogation. Don't let the name scare you. This technique basically means asking yourself deep questions while you're learning English.
That's right. Instead of just memorizing rules or words, you'll ask yourself questions to connect new information to things you already know. It helps you understand why something works the way it does.
For example, when you're learning a new grammar rule, instead of just memorizing the rule, ask yourself, why does this sentence use the past tense? By asking that question, you're forcing yourself to think about the logic behind the rule.
Exactly. This will make the rule stick in your mind much more than if you just read it and moved on. You're connecting it to what you already know, which helps create a stronger memory.
Another example is with new vocabulary. Instead of just memorizing a word and its meaning, ask yourself, how can I use this word in my life? And why is this word important in English?
When you ask these kinds of questions, you start building a mental map of how English works. It helps you see the bigger picture, not just isolated facts. You'll understand why certain words are important and how they fit into real conversations.
Right. Like if you're learning the word appreciate, don't just memorize the definition. Ask, how can I use this word in a conversation? Maybe it's in thanking someone or expressing gratitude, and ask yourself, why is this word important in polite conversations?
These questions turn your study sessions into active thinking exercises. Rather than just taking in information passively, you're actively engaging with it, making connections, and understanding how it fits into the language as a whole.
And the best part is, these questions don't just help you with grammar or vocabulary. They help you with everything you learn in English. Whether it's a listening exercise or a speaking practice session, asking yourself why and how keeps your mind engaged and makes learning feel more meaningful.
Exactly. Asking these questions builds a deeper understanding of English, and it makes the information easier to remember. So next time you're learning something new, try asking, why is this important? Or, how can I use this in my life? Illusion, meaning a false perception or belief, something that deceives or misleads. Example, highlighting every sentence in your textbook gives the illusion that you're learning, but it doesn't help you remember the material.
Retrieval, meaning the process of recalling or recovering information from memory. Example, instead of just rereading your notes, try retrieval by testing yourself on the material to improve your memory.
Cram. This word seems simple, but many people don't know what it means. It means to study intensively in a short period of time, typically before an exam. Example, don't just cram for your English test the night before. Spread out your studying to retain the information better.
Interleave, meaning to mix different types of tasks or subjects while studying to improve learning. Example, try to interleave grammar practice with vocabulary exercises to reinforce your learning and prevent boredom.
Interrogation, meaning the act of questioning or asking in depth to gain information or understanding. Example, when learning new words, use interrogation by asking, how can I use this word in real life? To connect it to your personal experience.
All right, let's quickly recap the key methods we discussed today. We talked about retrieval practice, where you actively test yourself to improve memory. Then there's spaced practice, which helps you learn over time, not in one cram session. Interleaving, mixing up your learning activities, keeps things interesting. And finally, asking why and how while studying connects new knowledge to what you already know.
These methods might feel different from what you're used to, but trust me, they're proven to work. Stick with them, and you'll definitely start seeing progress.
So, start applying one of these techniques today. Whether it's testing yourself on vocabulary or switching up your study sessions, give it a try. And don't forget to share your progress with us in the comments. We want to hear how it's going.
Remember, the journey to mastering English is all about consistency and using the right methods. You've got this.